Good evening and welcome to the People's Business. I'm Stacey Russell. Recently, the Central Bank of Barbados reported 2.6% growth for the first quarter of 2025. This was the fifth consecutive quarter of economic growth. This positive economic progress continues to be driven by the strong performance of the tourism industry, with long-stay arrivals up 2.4% on the first quarter of 2024, and the highest first quarter growth for the cruise industry, up by 37.1%. Without a doubt, tourism continues to be the lifeblood of the Barbados economy. But given the increasing global uncertainties and tensions, tourism internationally is expected to be impacted. This situation is so serious that our central bank expects a slowdown in Barbados's earnings from tourism and has revised the real gross domestic product growth forecast for 2025 from 3% to 2.7%. Tonight, we discuss tourism, the challenge for Barbados. Here to provide expert perspectives are the Chief Executive Officer of the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, BHTA, Mr. Ryan Forde, the Executive Director of the Intimate Hotels of Barbados, Ms. Cicely Callender, and Chairman of the Tourism Development Corporation, Mr. Mark Thompson. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll get straight into the discussion. Welcome back. Tonight we're discussing tourism, and it's off the back of really good news, but there are still challenges in this sector. Barbados's biggest income earner. From January to March, the hotel sector saw an increase in the occupancy rate of 3.5% compared to the first quarter of last year, and revenue per room was up 24%. Outstanding. Did the winter season live up to expectations, or could we have done better, especially given that there was a little softening from the UK market in terms of arrivals from that segment? I'm going to start with Mr. Ryan Forde.
Thank you. Good night. Well, obviously, it has been a great winter season from an accommodation perspective, and of course, we can always do better. We have to also remember that the Marriott group was going through renovations, and they're a big pick out of the UK market, and they are still scheduled to finish 2 more hotels this year, and then 2 more into early 2026 as well. So once you see those hotels start to come back on stream, you have a lot of tour operators over in the UK and other markets looking to book those in. We also had the Wyndham Grand, which was a new hotel, as well as South Point. And you know, with new hotels, it takes a little while for the market to get accustomed. You're doing a lot of familiarization trips. You're doing a lot of comp stays and letting people understand the experience. And those stays are to the people that are going to be booking on your behalf overseas, so that they can understand the island and the experience. So once you start to see more of that going on and some of the other construction on island complete, you will start to see more pickup. But obviously we are diversifying our product offering and also our marketing to different markets.
Miss Cicely Callender, tell me from the perspective of your group of hotels.
Certainly. So thank you for allowing us all to be here to be part of this panel this evening.
You're welcome.
And this important discussion that we're having. From an Intimate Hotels of Barbados perspective, certainly yes, it was a good winter season. As Ryan did say, it can always be better. A lot of our products and our properties, we certainly experienced quite a good winter. We had a strong winter going in. A lot of our hotels as well, they too have been able to do some work on their plants. So in terms of trying to make sure that the product is a lot more valuable, we had properties who would have put on, particularly of recent, Melbourne Inn and certainly Ocean Spray, they would have added to their product in terms of enhancing it with a restaurant and other provisions. So things like that always help with the products, and it always would be a good addition for tourism in Barbados.
Tell me a little bit more about the Intimate Hotels of Barbados.
Well, we are a group of just about 40 properties on island, so we represent roughly around 838 rooms or so on the island. So we have properties inland on the north of the island as well. Most of our properties are on the south coast, and we have a grouping of hotels, guest houses, villas, and apartments on the island as well. So Intimate is an association of these properties.
Would it be correct to say that you then represent more of the budget type hotels?
The more affordable, cozy, authentic, Bajan charm type of hotels, that's what we represent, yes.
Okay. And Mr. Mark Thompson, tell me about your organization and how are you viewing the last winter season?
Okay. Hi, Stacey. How are you doing?
I'm well.
Good night to everyone. Well, TDC, or Tourism Development Corporation, we prefer to call it TDC. You know, we are a private sector driven philanthropic organization. So we have, you know, around 44 members, thereabouts, who give willingly, and we put it in a fund and we use it to enhance the tourism product. And we tend to enhance it in two ways. Either we put money into product development, or we put money into marketing of overseas events, which will bring people to Barbados. Those are the two ways in which we really cooperate. So we tend to fill in gaps. There may be some things that don't get done unless we do them because, you know, the way how things go. Of course, we are always happy that the results are good. In terms of tourism, I mean, who wouldn't be happy? But there always will be challenges, as you noted, and but we'll continue to play our role as we have over the years. We've been around since '97, so and we spent about $30 million over those monk years supporting tourism.
Did the last winter season live up to expectations? What would you have wanted to see that did not necessarily come to fruition?
Well, we are not in the hard tourism business, so I mean we accept the results as they are. But we knew that going in that we should have a better tourism season than before. We should be on the up, and certainly the results show that. So we're happy with that.
Okay. Well, because we are doing so well, and because tourism is on the up, as you put it, what do you think is going to happen, especially in the near future, with us being able to have the capacity to deal with the increasing number of tourists that are coming to the island? You know, we are working on increasing our room stock. We're working on increased airlift. But how are we going to be able to balance that? Mr. Forde?
Yes, thank you very much. Obviously, the tourists or returning national, their palette is very diverse now. They're not only going to hotels. So as the hotels are building, normally takes around 2.5 years from start of construction to completion. So you're seeing more of that product coming on stream, and I'm sure the public has seen a lot of announcements going on. But at the same time, more residents are turning some of their properties into Airbnb. And then you also have villa product as well. The villa product in our association is over 13,000 rooms. Our hotels over the last 2.5 years have also gone up to around 6,200 room stock. And by the end of this year, even 2 more hotels are opening as well. Hotel Indigo and then Blue Monkey Hotel and Beach Club. So you have more room stock coming every year. Last year was South Point, the year before that was Wyndham. So while the hotels are adding, the villas are adding, and the local market is also adding more Airbnb. So you're actually having more product offering being there for accommodation. So as you have more tourists coming to the island with the more airlift that you're seeing, you're going to be able to accommodate them. Now, as you diversify, you also see new restaurants every month, new bars showing up. Attractions are expanding what they're able to offer in terms of their product. They're upgrading, they're spending money in it. So there's a lot more happening now on Barbados. And there's a drive now with the community tourism and sports tourism and entertainment and all those other segments of tourism that is going to keep Barbados top of mind in terms of offering.
Ms. Callender,
From
do we have the capacity?
Well, from an IHB perspective, there's only so much capacity in the sense that we are an association and we have that many properties and that many rooms. But in terms of adding value to what we offer as a hotel sector, we were looking more or less to push more products to mesh with our accommodation. So blending attractions with our accommodation product to have a more added value for that traveler coming to Barbados. So that's what we're looking to do from an IHB perspective, to try and see how best we can bolster the tourism product.
Tell me more about these plans where attractions are concerned, because I'm sure those who are working in attractions, that would be music to their ears.
Certainly, but so it's an area that we are exploring, particularly as Ryan did mention just now, with regards to community-based tourism. That's an area within tourism that we see a lot of potential for development, and we think that this can bring a more authentic experience for a traveler coming to Barbados if they can add something like this to their hotel stay in Barbados. So be it you are not necessarily going to the traditional attractions, but doing something within a more community-based spirit.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, you're into development. How can we improve on our capacity to handle the number of visitors that will be coming to Barbados?
And let me understand what you mean by capacity, though.
More and more tourists that are coming, having enough the room stock, having the various services that can provide them with an ease of stay.
So can we handle the increase in tourists, people coming?
Yes.
Well, I think, okay, it's one thing to have the rooms and so forth, but I actually think that probably the most significant thing about that is probably the service that we offer. So, I mean, we have to be very efficient in what we do. We need to raise the level of our services. I think that's mainly, I think, where we've got to go. I mean, there are all sorts of other factors. There's the infrastructure factor. There's, roads. There's communication in terms of, the modern world. All these kinds of things. But I think service is mainly where it's at. If we have a level of service that's efficient, we will be able to, and that goes, well, I mean, not just in tourism, that goes throughout everything that we do. And if we have a high service level, I think we'll be fine. But that's easier said than done. Right?
Are you satisfied with the level of service?
Oh, no, not in general in Barbados, no. And you mean in tourism? Certainly tourism is certainly one of the better service, or it's certainly a service-oriented profession, and or industry rather. And certainly the level of service in tourism is higher than lots of others, but yeah, we can always get better.
What would you like to see change? Well, how would you suggest that we go about revolutionizing the way we serve?
That's a very good question. I mean, that's a very broad question, because it could be as personal as the person at the desk, but it also could be as something as wide as the experience when you come into Grantley Adams International Airport or the seaport, or when you leave, all those kinds of things. And that can go down to the taxi guide, to the immigration, all those kinds of things. I think the whole experience factor is really what we've got to look at, and that speaks directly to the things that Cicely just brought up in terms of community tourism and so forth. So if that can just go right through the culture, we can inculcate that. I think that's where we got to be. We got to be at that level.
We're soon going to a break, but I want you to break down community tourism a little bit more for us. What does that really mean?
I was there thinking really and truly about that last question, Mark, and that's so much more that we could talk on that topic. So hopefully we can a little bit later. With regards to community tourism, really and truly, you're not going to go into a very big built-up building and see a bunch of signs. It has to be very raw and authentic. And that is a more natural side. If you're going crabbing down on the East Coast, or if you're going down by Walker's Reserve and then you're going into the communities afterwards and you're getting a home-cooked meal, it's something that is built by the community, for the community, and there's connections, whether it's the artisans that are plying the trade and they're being able to accommodate tourists to understand how they make pottery or how they do these paintings, and then also being able to sell it back, and you're connecting the community to the businesses. So a hotel is always going to worry about the guests that's coming to them or the experience that they can offer on property. The tour operators, the DMCs and those others, they're going to also look at taking you off property. But it doesn't always have to be a well-established attraction. Those will always be selling as well. But how do you get into the community to make somebody feel like this in Barbados stood out different than that in Grenada or in Jamaica or St. Lucia, etc. During COVID-19 period, Barbados became a hiker's paradise. I'm from the country, from the East Coast, and a lot of people were coming to the East Coast to go hiking, and it was the first time they ever saw these small communities, or they can go and buy these wrist beads from this family, or they can go and learn how to paint this, or can go crabbing in St. Joseph and St. Andrew. All these things that they were not aware of, but because we were restricted to not going to fetes and events and to restaurants in large numbers, they now had to go into nature. They had to go into communities where there was actually more space, and if you were going down into, let's say, St. Lawrence Gap or Bridgetown or whatever the case might be. And that is really and truly the true and authentic feeling of being a Barbadian.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We're going to a commercial break, and then we're coming right back with more of the People's Business. Welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we're discussing tourism, the challenge for Barbados. And before we went to the break, we were talking about how we're going to be diversifying our offerings and dealing with increased capacity, given that this sector continues to drive the Barbados economy, and more people are thinking about Barbados as they consider their travels. We're going to encourage you callers to call in, make your contributions, ask your questions. You can call us on 228-5562 or 228-5563. Now, let's talk about summer. We were just discussing this bumper winter performance, but then when we come to summer, there seems to be a different story. What are the plans for this upcoming summer season? Given that WestJet, for instance, has renewed its commitment to its twice weekly service out of Toronto. I know that here in Barbados, we're also going to be hosting a big tourism event, BGI Connect. What else do we have on the cards to make summer as beautiful as winter has been, financially, that is? Who wants to start this segment? I'm looking at Miss Callender.
You are, okay. Well, certainly summer this time around, we can't forget that there is Carifesta at the end of August, and that certainly should bring in quite a stream of regional persons, definitely from the diaspora. So we can't forget that. That is a big one for us. And also, in addition to that, there is additional airlift coming out as well. I think we do have 4 flights thus far out of from Copa. And we're going to be seeing an additional one as well during the summer as well. So there's supposed to be 5 flights coming out as well during summer. So that should certainly help with arrival boosting.
Okay. Why is the summer season such a challenge?
It's a challenge because in the winter you have the snowbirds that can't leave Canada and the US, for example, or the UK and go to Europe because it's cold. So when Europe is warm, or Alaska now is warmer, this is the time for them to go and experience it, because they're not going to leave winter to chase winter unless they're into snowboarding and skiing. But now they can go over to the Indian Ocean, they can go over to Europe, they can go over obviously to Africa, different places that they traditionally can't do during December and March in a comfortable state, because it'll be just as cold for them. So that is the first challenge. And then also in the summertime, a lot of the Caribbean nationals also like to go out, and they believe that Europe is, Euro trip for the summer, but Europe is extremely expensive for the summer. So they don't know that, but they want to go to it because it's warmer than the typical cold, and us Caribbean people don't like to go to cold countries as often as we do to warm countries. So you have those challenges, but those are challenges that we're looking to overcome. Just last month, we went on a road show throughout Western Canada. So you're looking at Winnipeg, Calgary, you're looking at Vancouver. These are cities that you don't typically hear being called. You normally hear in Toronto and Montreal. We also had in the US market, they're going off to more romance shows. Persons are looking to get married, or for travel and adventure, come and do more experiences from diving, or if it's scuba diving and surfing, etc. So you have that happening. We went to a sports tourism trade show to try to push destination sports events from amateur all the way up to masters. All these things are happening. I would say, yes, it still is not perfect. But if last year you saw something from around 7 to 10% increase from the year before, in June, for example, when there was Cricket World Cup, and now we're forecasting to have the same June as last year June, it means that there has been improvement. Us now that are operating in hotels, we want to see that improvement up 30-40% for obvious reasons, and I'm sure the ministry and the BTMI as well. But summer is going to be a challenge for a couple of years. But as you mentioned, and I think Cicely was just mentioning too with regards to Copa, they have 2 months in our summer where they go on vacation. And it's literally just 2 hours and 45 minutes over from Panama. If we can start to get some direct flights dealing with Colombia, Brazil and whatnot, you're going to see that increase in travel. And the last one that is very impressive is seeing the emerging markets numbers going up. That is very impressive as well, because you're going to have Africa, United Arab Emirates, and you're going to have them picking up slowly and slowly as we go through the following years.
Mr. Thompson, what do you envision for our summer season?
Well, we just tend to follow what the BTMI and BHD, we work with them in terms of that. I was just thinking about what Ryan was saying, and thinking that a simple thing would be we would have to go to markets where our summer is their winter. Now, that could be below the equator in South America. Of course, now you have the language barrier, those kinds of things. But I think that'd be one thing. But I don't really know what the plan is in relation to that. From our perspective, we just keep on putting money into our product and putting money into events we think are going to help bring tourists here. We just on Friday, we just were part of the opening of the Graham Hall Nature Sanctuary. I think is huge for our biodiversity and so forth. It's a complete, it's really a treasure, a national treasure in my opinion. And we thank Barbados Wetlands Trust and Tony De Silva, and the Prime Minister was there to open it up, as well as ourselves. And that I think is a major thing. Part of it, I mean, we had a full tour. I mean, it was pretty exciting, that tour. And it's also back to local ownership, which is very important as well. And the park, the beginning park, right, the cafe is going to be free to locals alike. If you want to see the exhibits, you have to pay to go in, but at least you can be there and partake in the environment. And I think that's an important thing that has just opened.
Where has other funds gone to in terms of other projects that the TDC has been taking on?
Sure. I mean, one that we see all the time, which is when you drive down the highways, which are the palms all along the highways. TD funds, we put in all these palms all along the ABC highway, all the highway 2A and so forth and so on. We did that. There are things that you don't see, like say the cameras for security that would go back to the police monitoring system on the South Coast, parts of the West Coast, parts of near and around Bridgetown. We've done that. But as simple as, let's say we put money into like a darts tournament where people come down from various countries, whether from United States, Canada, Europe, and in the region, and they might bring 200 people who are staying here for 2 weeks in hotels in the Gap, and something like that, Masters tournament, all sorts of different things.
Okay.
And so we continue to do those kinds of things. We don't try to stay in a project long time. In other words, we're not giving money forever. We try to get involved, give you the seed money, and then we review it after 3 years. And if after 3 years you come with a plan that you want to expand this, well, we might stay in it, and then we go from there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
We have a caller on the line. Caller, good night. Kindly go ahead.
Good night, Stacey, to you on the panel. Is there any major plan in the tourism area to significantly boost the sports tourism during the winter season, during the summer season? Because what we can do is to look at major events that happen throughout the world and see if we can capture them during the summertime when you have a lull. So what is the tourist board doing to make that attraction viable for the country to gain some good foreign exchange? Thank you.
Mr. Forde, you were just mentioning that, so you can expand?
I would gladly take thank you, first of all, to the caller for the question. It's a very good question. And I was mentioning earlier, we've begun going to trade show conference that sees over 1,000 persons attend. It's called Teams in USA, and then there's another one in Teams Europe. And these are just 2 trade shows that I'll mention, because while they go to other trade shows and road shows, sports tourism is actually pushed every single week that the BTMI is off at these trade shows. Apart from that, we've also been working with the Ministry of Tourism with regards to sports tourism policy, and part of that, led by Mr. Mark Durant and the Permanent Secretary Francine Blackman, they would have hosted a conversation task force between the sports entities in Barbados as well as the tourism providers. The reason being, we could promote everything under the sun, but we still need to have the facilities up to a certain standard. We also need to make sure that we pick our calendars accordingly, because everyone may want a specific month, specific time, but you need lead time to not just market, but to put in a bid document and to host. Currently, I believe Domino's, which we would have worked on before, they're looking to come in September, which is the second worst month of the year for Barbados. We're also pushing very hard to capture World Bridge in 2027. That's 4,000 people in itself. And we are internally working at looking at our own trade show of how we can develop a Caribbean sports tourism trade show. Whether we host it or not, we'll see. However, we're looking for that around June. which is also the worst month. So again, we've started these task force to try to improve from the $120 million that already comes in from sports tourism, and see how we can start to push individuals to make their bookings for destination sporting events, training, seminars, conferences, because everyone thinks you are actually coming to only compete, but there's a lot of business available from hosting conferences and training seminars and whatnot, and that is the direction we're going. And it was a great policy discussion and chat with the sporting entities. Some of them have seen an uptick in terms of business throughout the hotels and getting special discounts. I know my office probably every week they're tired of me because I'm sending them, because some sporting association has reached out and we've been just putting it out there. But I guess we can speak from it from our perspective, but the sporting entities, if they, the ones that obviously have had some good success so far, they can also come out and speak about how much assistance is going on and what the marketing opportunities are as well. But there is a big thrust for sports tourism right now.
Do you want to have an input on the sports question?
Well, from an IHB perspective, I wouldn't speak on that end, but from a sporting perspective, and this is Cicely speaking as a weightlifter, this is Cicely speaking as a person who has traveled with a weightlifting team for a number of years now. I really appreciate the question that the caller actually posed, because as Ryan alluded to, I guess one of the biggest things within Barbados right now is the fact that we don't have what I would term a high performance training center for a lot of our athletes. So there have been a number of athletes and a number of associations that have been displaced, given the infrastructure of the stadium now has to change. So there were a lot of federations that had to move from that particular area to actually move to someplace else. There are some federations who still have not been given a placement, for example, as to where they are actually going to train. So for us to develop sports tourism within Barbados, certainly we need to have an area whereby athletes can actually train and train consistently as well. And I think that's something that we're missing here. And hopefully we will be able to see that turn around when we do have a new facility coming on stream.
Okay. And on that note, we're taking a commercial break and we're coming right back with more of The People's Business. Welcome back to The People's Business. We're discussing tourism tonight and the challenge that it poses for Barbados. We have a caller on the line. Good night, caller. Go ahead.
Good night. Question, and then I'm going to say why I asked this question. Is the safety of the visitors to this country a priority? The reason I asked that question is, in the 70s and the 80s, we had a vibrant merchant navy association from Barbados. And when we go to work at sea, when we go to other countries, they will always tell us where to go, where to don't go, what to wear, like jewelry or anything so, or do not wear certain type of clothing that will make you stand out. And it was for our safety, because we were employees, but yet still we were visitors because we were merchant navy sailors. So I want to know if the safety of our visitors to this country is a priority, and that when they leave to come here, that they can feel a rather measure of safety. Thank you.
Well, you're not in law enforcement, but I'm sure you can respond to this.
What I would say is that both the BHTA and Tourism Development Corporation, we've put money into the cameras going back to the command center of the police. And I know for a fact that that has helped solve a lot of crime and so forth. But there's still obviously things to be done in terms of lighting and in certain areas and so on and so forth. And those are things that even now are under discussion. I don't think, I mean, of course, safety is priority, absolutely. Yeah.
Can we say that our tourists are safe in Barbados?
Generally, they're safe. I mean, obviously, we've all seen the uptick recently in terms of violent crimes. And it is something that obviously we're all addressing. As you rightfully said, we're not law enforcement, but we definitely have made sure to let the Attorney General know, as well as the Commissioner of Police, and let them know where we're able to offer assistance and where we are concerned. Back to the caller's question, he was more, I think, leveraging or pushing more on the communication aspect. When someone makes a booking to Barbados, they are prompted with information on Barbados, and it is also on the Visit Barbados website as well. And then hotels also issue you information on the do's and don't do's the guest services do or they should do. Also give that level of communication. We also have a great connection with the tourism liaison police officer as well, part of the Barbados Police Service. And as Mark mentioned, from the TTC and the BHTA perspective, we have actually invested thousands of dollars into cameras with the police. We've also, hundreds of thousands of dollars, as well as the segways. And even during COVID-19, the Ministry of Health would also received tablets in order to process persons coming into the island as well. So there is a lot of investment, and that's from a TDC perspective, which also pulls on the funds from the BHTA Tourism Fund, where the focus is not on a guest stay. It's not on a local guest or visiting guest stay. It's really on the infrastructure needs of the country and us as locals. So that's from a security perspective, that is from a transportation perspective, or just general communication.
Ms. Callender, are tourists safe in this country?
Well, certainly I know, as Ryan did say as well, with regards to what is handed to a guest in terms of telling them about their precautions that they need to take, it is not to say when you go out in Barbados, yes, it is generally a safe place or termed to be a safe place, but you behave as if you do as you are at home, in the sense that, you know, you don't take certain risks when you are, you know, going down lonely streets by yourself, etc. So generally, those are the kind of narratives we would give to a guest, letting them know, you know, these do's and not to do, you know, on an island. Okay. But, you know, if persons then take this perspective is another thing, you know, that's the other thing that we always have to be wary of. All the advice that's given is not necessarily taken.
We have another caller on the line. Go ahead, caller. Welcome.
Yeah, good night to your panel. I had a question in terms of whether the tourist board is looking at wheelchair tourism. You know, there are numerous destinations and tour companies that offer sort of wheelchair-friendly experiences, and I was just wondering if that's something that the tourism plan will be looking at in terms of, you know, a difference to the regular tourist that comes. You know, there are a lot of those families, very wealthy families, that have children or whatever who are, you know, may have suffered some disability and so on, but they still want to travel, and they belong to different organizations that use wheelchairs. So, you know, they plan these tours in large numbers and so on. Just a question I wanted to pose to see whether it was another area that, you know, they're looking at as well, because it has a lot of potential for diversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's quite a clever question, because this gives us an opportunity to consider inclusivity and diversity, as the caller has said. What is your take?
Thank you very much to the caller, obviously, for the question. The term is really accessible tourism. And what you would see from a tourism perspective is, first of all, we don't represent the tourism board. That's the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. But they don't set policy and legislation. They're like the voice, the ears, the eyes in the market, marketing the destination. On the ground, we are the product, the hotels here on the ground, villas, etc. And numerous hotels do offer accessible rooms, as well as some of the restaurants. What I think is that with the change of time, I believe on the government side who write legislation, they are making it easier for the construction side of things in terms of the policy that needed to be changed in reference to accessible tourism. So that way when the construction companies are building for the developers, that they are understanding what the laws are in terms of building. Now in terms of the speed of that going through, I can't speak to that because that's not our end, but I know that we do, however, market accessible tourism. Just 2 weeks ago, the European Office from the Tourism Board was asking us for a list of all of our hotels as well as attractions that do have accessible tourism options, because that is a big question coming out of the European market. So it is an area that we have to address, but we have to also work with the legislative bodies as well to make sure we accommodate it. What I would say, however, is that in any hotel, it's probably going to be less than 10 or 5% of your room stock, because it's not the most in demand of the travelers that are coming, but you still need to make sure you have it as an option.
Ms. Callender, are you seeing a demand amongst the intimate hotels of Barbados for accessible tourism?
Not anything different to what would be the norm, as Ryan did mention, that 5%, and most times what would happen is that ground floor rooms would be those rooms that would be used for those persons who are mobile challenged, and obviously then, you know, we would have, some properties would have things like elevators that persons can utilize as well too for accessibility.
Okay. Before we went to the break, we were talking about sports tourism and how that can be used to boost arrivals during the summer months. And Mr. Thompson, you wanted to elaborate some more.
Yeah, I would mind elaborating on this point as well, but I just want to say from a perspective of facilities, let's say for instance, the aquatic center, that, you know, they have a facility there that needed some upgrading, and that's just a way that we can help. We've put money into it, upgrade it, so that they can have teams come over and participate in tournaments and so forth and so on. That's one aspect of things. Also, let's say the Hockey Federation, for years they were operating on an old AstroTurf, and that AstroTurf was replaced and a pavilion built up and so forth. You go there now, they are now bringing teams in like they used to long before, bringing teams in. So you get a whole bunch of teams coming in. You can have 30 teams coming in, and that's a whole entourage, and you end with 500 or 600 persons coming to Barbados. So those are things that we've gotten involved in terms of that. In terms of accessibility, which is a sort of wider range thing, that's definitely a legislative thing, a thing that comes from the planning authorities are saying that you have to implement certain things to make things accessible. So any new construction and so forth going on, that has to follow that line. So that comes from the architect all the way down to the builder. There are two projects I can mention. I'll go back to the Graham Hall Nature Sanctuary, which has just opened, or rather opened officially, but won't really open to the public, I think, to the end of the month. All the pathways, everything is fully accessible. So that's how that project has gone. The other one I would mention is what we call the Trailways project, which is just a paved area about a kilometre long up in St. George near Buckley. And there are some more pathways planned and needs to be expanded. But I mention that because of people who want to exercise, who want to walk away from the traffic, you know, the ongoing traffic around. And then there are persons who are wheelchair bound, as the case may be, who use that and who can utilize that without being fearful of the traffic situation. So that's something. So those are things that, you know, as we go along, we will push as much as we can.
Okay, well, our time is quickly getting away, but there are two issues that I really would like us to cover before we close tonight. And one of them has to do with the ownership of hotels in this country. I think we have recently seen some information circulating online that most or all of the hotels in Barbados are owned by foreigners, and therefore our revenues are being, repatriated out of Barbados. Can we use this opportunity to clear up these misinformation?
Well, we from IHB perspective, Intimate Hotels of Barbados, certainly all of our hotels are locally owned. And I would also venture to say that 51% of our hotels are female owned as well, female owned and operated. So that myth regarding the revenue streams going out of Barbados certainly would be an incorrect one. And that's one that, as Ryan was saying earlier as well too, we really need to drive awareness to the public as to what really happens in tourism with regards to said ownership and property ownership in Barbados.
Mr. Forde?
Yes, thank you very much. I think this topic has come up recently, and as Cicely just ended, we have to probably be a louder voice to educate the public on tourism more than just the announcements, of airlines or new hotels, but letting them know what really goes into the day-to-day. As Cicely mentioned with IHB, 100% of their membership are owned. Over 60% of the BHTA is locally owned. When we put the two together, 75% of our hotels in Barbados are actually locally owned. And then there's the other myth out there is that every time there's an announcement of a new hotel that it is the government investing in a hotel. I believe from the last stats that we had, the only two hotels that the government owns are the Hilton and the Wyndham. However, that leaves you, in the BHTA perspective, 77 other hotels are owned by private investors. And I think that topic comes up because they're old buildings and someone announced that they're purchasing it and they're going to develop. And obviously the government makes the announcement because it's employment, it's tax receipts coming in. But then the general public believes that it's the government that is buying the hotel and investing, or that they've transferred the hotel. But at the same time, if it's an old building, and as long as you pass community perspective, the architectural side, all the testing that normally goes into to develop a property, we have gone decades and seen so many properties, from the old Caribbean hotels sitting there, the old eye hospitals sitting there, Discovery Bay Hotel, and the list can go on. And people get very upset and flustered because now someone, a private individual, wants to invest, sees a business opportunity to build a hotel or whatever else in it, rather than trying to understand the reason behind it. And then they start to align it with the government's announcement. And really and truly, 75% of the hotels are locally owned by Barbadians, which means wherever that individual Barbadian has his bank account, majority of them here in Barbados, or some might be overseas, that's how it operates. You have your personal bank accounts, I have mine, so you will have different bank accounts in different countries. But the topic went out during a podcast on TikTok where it was allowed to say every single hotel in Barbados is owned by a foreigner and all of the money goes out of the country. And the problem with social media today is that negativity spreads faster than positivity. So it was inaccurate, it went out, and people ran with it. And then it causes more strife in the general public when we're trying to just do better for Barbados and for our economy.
On that note, we're taking a break and we're coming right back with more of The People's Business. Welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we've been discussing tourism, the challenge for Barbados. And as we're about to wrap up, of course, we have to think globally. We're getting our tourists from all over the world, and we're living in some very uncertain times. And one of my final questions is, how are we going to grapple with these uncertainties, especially where trade relations between various blocks are playing out right now? How are we going to grapple with that and keep our tourism product growing? Ms. Callender.
Stacey looks directly at me. Well, what I can say is that it gives us an opportunity. You see, we always think of a challenge, but we also have to think of opportunities with the challenge. So it gives us the opportunity to try and see how creative we can be, how innovative we can be. We've always been a resilient people. So there's nothing to doubt that whatever is to come, we will certainly face it head on, and we will be able to fight through whatever challenge there is. But I do believe that, you know, it gives us an opportunity to rethink tourism and rethink how we collaborate with each other, and to make sure that the products and the plant remains and becomes resilient within these times.
Mr. Thompson?
Broad topic. Well, obviously we have no control over the global situation, but I would say resilience is something that we're very familiar with. We just had COVID-19. Couldn't want anything bigger than that in terms of resilience. But coming out of that, I know that we had to ask the question, what really is resilience? What it means for you individually, what it means for you as a company, and so forth. Certainly one of the things that I think that, and I can see it happening in the way how the BTMI is approaching things, is diversity. So if we just spread around, where are we going to get those tourists? What kind of tourists? And then we also need to also look internally at our product. Those are the combination of things, I think, that will help us through any hardship, so to speak. I think that's the only answer I can give on that.
Mr. Forde?
I think it goes to the entire conversation that we're having today. Earlier we were talking about how can we envision tourism differently, and I think we have to kind of take a step back from only looking at sector to sector, because we have to form stronger linkages. And even from an educational standpoint, we need to keep reinvesting into our people, and then on the infrastructure, back into our product. But then even also on the junior level, the youngsters coming through the primary and secondary, when it comes to service, we need to be able to be teaching them about cross-cultural management, understanding different cultures. How do you speak to people? And this goes to every sector, because they might love our hotel, might love our attraction, they might go to a gas station or to a bank or whatever, and they might not get the same level of service or comfort to return. And then on the broader scale, as what Mark and Cicely are mentioning, you have to diversify into sports. It's not just, basketball wants to come, it can start. No, the infrastructure has to be redeveloped. The management of how the communication goes, the bid documents go out, as well as us on the tourism side, the marketing and the accommodation and the transport, all of those experiences all come together as one when the linkages are stronger. And that conversation can go on and on. And I think you will probably need a longer show when you start to speak about tourism linkages, because we are one of 3 quote-unquote sectors that is actually connected to the entire economy of Barbados, alongside with finance as well as government, because they set legislation.
I have a question specifically for you, Mr. Forde, before I ask everyone to give their final thoughts. The Barbados Labor Clauses Concessions Act outlines conditions for concessions granted to employers. It's intended to ensure they adhere to fair labor practices. How has that been accepted in the sector?
Well, our properties and businesses always look towards fair practices. Like every sector, there's always going to be a 1 or 2 off that there may be something negative that occur, but obviously tourism is always at the front. So it makes it seem as though there's such negativity in tourism. But for us, in terms of the Labor Clauses Act, those are draft legislation that would have come to us to review. We would have gone back and forth because, as I mentioned before the show, when you write legislation, it's not always the practicality of how it will actually work out. And that is a conversation that we've been having with our ministry as well as with the Minister of Labor. Both of those ministers have come from the tourism world, so they understand it to a certain extent that when they go and join the two between legislation and practicality, that it works out. But it is an area that is going to keep coming up over time. And I think, again, this is where there's a miseducation that everybody in tourism gets concessions. There's certain benchmarks that you have to meet in order to reach concessions. On the labor side, that is a next conversation that once you follow a certain guideline, and we actually have an agreement with the Barbados Workers Union, and that has been going on for decades. Of course, the negotiations go on for a year or 2 years for different reasons, but our hotels have actually been practicing, even ones that are not part of that agreement, they still practice sometimes the same level of those terms or even beyond. And as I mentioned, yes, some people say, oh, there are some negative things that happen, but guess what? In every single sector, but are we going to keep trying to kill one sector to big up another, or are we going to work collectively to improve where we've fallen short?
Okay.
You're welcome.
Tonight we've been discussing tourism and the challenges that this sector faces as the biggest income earner for our islands. And as we wrap up, I'm going to ask each one of our guests to give their final words in terms of how we face the challenges and we go forward as strongly as we can. Mr. Mark Thompson, Chairman of the Tourism Development Corporation.
Sure, we'll continue to try to grow our membership, but we certainly are going to continue to put money into supporting events that we know are going to bring people here to Barbados and spend their money here. We're also going to focus on certain projects to help with improvement of our product. Definitely put something else new in the market, and we're going to continue to do those things.
Okay. Ms. Cicely Callender, Executive Director of the Intimate Hotels of Barbados, your final words.
Yes, Intimate Hotels of Barbados, we will too continue to play our part with regards to tourism. We will try our best to help the sector and continue to enhance our products. We have some training planned for the summer months so that we can continue to enhance our service. That's one thing we're going to work on for sure. In addition to that, certainly I want us to all remember that tourism is our business and that we should all play our part. I mean, one hand cannot clap without the other, and we all need to work together in order to make the sector work and to make the sector grow.
Mr. Ryan Forde, you
Yes,
are
please.
the Chief Executive Officer of the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, commonly known as BHTA.
Yes,
You're
please.
having the final words.
Well, thank you for that. We will continue to invest in the 3 Ps, our people, our product, and our partnerships. And those are the experiences that will help us to build a stronger economy. And the reason I say partnerships is because it's not just a hotel or an airline that makes tourism. It's you having a media conference, then the audiovisual companies are going to make money, the transportation providers will make money, and that's how you drive the economy. But on the front end, people see it as tourism. And I think the education of the general public to understanding why someone has stayed in tourism for 30 and 40 years and receiving all of those awards is because it's a very lovely industry with a lot of opportunity. And like all of them, we have to keep reinvesting back into our people, our product, and our partnerships. And we will continue to do that at the BHTA.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. And thank you so much for viewing. Thank you for tuning in to The People's Business. I'm Stacey Russell, and on behalf of the head of our news and current affairs, Mr. Kent Jerson, and the crew, I look forward to hosting you again soon for another edition of The People's Business. It's your business. Good night.